Welcome to Let's Get Real with Tina, Bill.
Hey guys, welcome back. This is Let's Get Real, and I'm Tina Bill. And of course, we have the famous
Hannah.
Hannah. How do you feel about me calling you famous?
It's weird. Hannah, it's weird you call me Hannah. That's my name, but
It's usually honey.
Yeah.
Honey, what are you
Honey.
doing today?
Yeah.
Sweetheart.
Gracilia.
Oh my
Gracilia
gosh.
Bedelia. That's what you used to call me.
Yes, because there was Amelia Bedelia,
Yeah,
the
I know.
books. And I loved Amelia Bedelia books. And so I would call her Gracilia Bedelia. My goodness, we're a family of nicknames, though.
Yeah, for
Like,
sure.
seriously, Isaiah calls Emerson Jimmy.
Yeah. Oh, Lord.
And
Blaine started saying it too. He said, what, Jimmy?
Oh my gosh. So when Blaine was really tiny, remember when we kept
Oh
him?
my gosh, yes.
And we made up a song. Remember, I'm a songwriter, so I was constantly making up songs.
Yep.
And I wrote a song called Blaine Samuel,
Yes, you did.
right? This was way before our beautiful Isaac.
I was going to say this before I
Rojas.
married Puerto Rican.
Seriously.
I know.
And so I made a song called Blaine Samuel. Let's sing it. All right,
Okay,
ready?
ready? Yeah.
1, 2, 3. Blaine Samuel, Blaine Samuel, Blaine Samuel, do-do-do-do-do. Boo! Blaine Samuel, Blaine Samuel, Blaine Samuel, do-do-do-do-do. Boo! Oh my gosh.
And he loved it.
He loved
Oh
it.
my gosh.
When he was crying in the car,
Oh, yes.
that's how we got him to be quiet.
It is, yeah.
And it
is.
reminds me of when Isaiah was baby and he would cry and we would play Milli Vanilli.
Oh my gosh. That's funny.
And he would immediately shut up. And it was such a game that we would play Milli Vanilli when he was crying, and he would stop and we would turn it off and on just because Randy and I would just laugh because it was the funniest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
So anyway, the other day, I didn't tell you this, but
Oh,
I
no.
started singing Blaine Samuel to Blaine.
Aw.
And he, of course, he didn't remember it. But once I sang it, he loved it.
Aw.
And so, but what is kind of funny, and I had to stop calling him Blaine Samuel, his name is Blaine Samuel, was we would be in public. And
Yeah.
I literally would just be like, oh, Blaine Samuel. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I probably better stop. He was actually learning that.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's fun. And I think it's neat just to talk about,
Yeah.
real life stuff. I mean, this is Let's Get Real.
Well,
with
yeah,
Tina
it
Bill.
is, definitely. And then we go to when we were keeping him and he was first trying to talk, and obviously my name is Hannah, and he started calling me Heiny, and I was like, oh, it's so cute. And Mom was like, yeah, not when he's 18, it's not going to be cute. And I was like, well, yeah, that's probably pretty accurate. And so Mom thankfully got him saying honey, and now that's just, I'm honey.
You're honey.
I'm honey.
And what's awesome is I talked about in the previous podcast, your first song was American Honey.
Yeah.
And I said, your voice is just like honey. And we actually had a customer come into our store about last year or 2 years ago. And he heard Hannah sing and he said, oh my gosh.
Your voice is as sweet as honey.
And, that's really prophetic, Hannah.
Yeah.
So, and then the babies call you honey.
Yeah.
Because even if he didn't call you Heiny when he was 18, I still didn't want him calling you Heiny at like 4.
Yeah.
So it was honey, and it's going to be honey forever, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So let's just kind of pick back up where we left off on the other podcast, talking about families working together in business, in ministry, and how it stemmed from just the way we communicated in our home. And you were talking about our family meetings
Yeah.
and how special that was. And, I can remember one specific meeting that there were a lot of tears.
Yeah.
There were a lot of tears. And I'm going to touch on that just a little bit, not too much, but there was something that you and Dad and I, and of course Isaiah, you weren't saying a lot because it wasn't specifically you.
Right.
But it really did affect your brother and your dad and I. And there was a situation that your brother really wanted to do something that Dad and I wasn't on board with. We had prayed about it. We could not get a peace. And Dad and I just had to stick to our guns. And Dad would call me sometimes on his way home from work and he would cry. And Dad's the softie. Hannah picked that up from Dad. She's crying right now, guys. Okay.
I can't help it.
I had to learn how to cry, but that's just because the way I was raised. So anyway, Dad would call me on the way home from work and he would say, we're just going to let him do what he wants because, I love him and I don't want anything, any wedge in our family. And I was like, but babe, unless the Holy Spirit gives us that, we just can't bless it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like Isaiah was doing anything bad, guys, okay? It wasn't like that, but it was a life decision. And it was hard on Isaiah, lots of tears on his part, and then, of course, eventually lots of tears on my part. But in that meeting, we explained to him that we loved him with all of our hearts and all of our tears at that moment, but we could not extend that spiritual blessing.
Yeah.
And in that, because of the respect that he had for our family as a family and for God, number one, he did not act on that. What he really wanted to do, he thought he wanted to do, he did not act on that because of the great level of respect. And he was like, 19, I think, or something like that. And he could have, because he was over 18, by golly, he was his own adult. I never heard that in the household.
Yeah.
Guys, my kids never came to us and said, well, by gosh, we're 18 and we can do what we want. They never did that, ever. And we, again, as parents, we didn't go to them and say, well, you're going to do what we say because, by gosh, you're living in our household. We didn't do that, guys. We didn't. But what we did say was, we love you. If that's your choice, we can't bless it, but we still love you. We don't change there. And we wouldn't treat our kids different, but we would not be able to extend a spiritual blessing. So do you have anything you want to add to that?
I think that, like, having those meetings and things like that, we were a family that loved each other. And I mean, we still do that loved each other. Like, we're gone. We did, and we do. And I think that that's the biggest thing. And I think that, that's even God's greatest commandment is love one another, and love each other unconditionally. And it doesn't matter what you're going through, or even if you're mad at, at the parent or the child or whatever it is, but you still love each other and you don't waver on that. And I think that in those meetings, that's what was the hardest thing, is because we all knew how much we loved each other.
And that's why it hurt.
And that's why it hurt. And that's why every single one of us were crying. And it wasn't just like Isaiah was mad and upset, or, whatever the situation was. We were all feeling that same thing, because and I kind of go off to saying, me being married now that now that I'm married, we're one. And we as a family, we are one, and spiritually. And so when one hurts, the other one's hurt.
It truly, that was truly how it was, because even though that situation didn't affect you directly, you were still crying. Yeah. Because you saw the pain from both sides. Yeah. You saw how Dad and I was hurting, and then you saw how Isaiah was hurting. Yeah. And because you do love, we as a family do love so strongly, and we respect each other so much, that we don't want to see the other one hurt. And we don't want to see the other one cry or be upset. But at the same time, what I want to stress to parents and families, and Hannah, even you, when you raise your family, whenever you guys have babies, there's going to be times when you're going to have to make decisions that your kids aren't going to understand. And it's going to crush you on the inside, because there's going to be a sense of hurt to them that they don't understand at the moment. And you're going to say, you're going to explain it every way you know how. You're going to pray and ask Holy Spirit to give you every angle, excuse me, so you can explain that to those babies. Yeah. But at the end of the day, you will have to stand firm on some things. And the world is going to come at them, just like they did you and Isaiah. Yeah. But Dad and I, even though we saw it, we knew your pain, the hurt, whatever, and because you had some things in your life, but we just couldn't waver from what we believed. But we didn't approach it with the iron fist or the Thor hammer. Right. We approached it, because this is our convictions and we love you so much. This is just where we're at.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, that goes back to that respect thing. We knew, or I will say I knew, as a child, that you didn't want me to hurt. You didn't want to hurt me. Those were not your intentions. And then we would always go back to, you know, how God sees his children. And, you know, that's how you saw us, is like, you don't want us to hurt. It doesn't make you happy to spank us, even when we need it, or whatever that was, you know, like that it hurts you. And parents always say, oh, it hurts me more than it hurt you. Well, you know, I really feel like it does. And now having Blaine and me, like, there's things and I'm like, oh my gosh, I just can't imagine. Like, a kid took his water bottle and I was like, where's this child? You know, like, and, you know, little boy was kicking over Emmy's blocks and I'm like, what the heck? Like, don't do that, you know? And it is something that rises up inside of you. And so, I think that it's important to, you always, if you were upset with us, you told us. And you said, you know what, I'm upset right now. Even if you needed time to go, you know, pray about things or cool down or whatever that was, like, just like we did. We were like, I can't talk to you about this right now. I'm too mad. I'm going to my room, you know. And most of the time, we'd literally walk to the door and then we'd turn around and come back, because that's just not how we were as a family. Like, we communicated and said things, and we never left without saying I love you. We never, you know, it was a rule. And Isaac and I do that to this day. Like, I don't get off the phone with him. We don't go to bed angry, because you never know what that next moment is going to be.
Right. That was a big deal. And when you and Isaiah would have a little tiff, I would say, hug. And then I was like, say you're sorry. And then it was that, I'm sorry. I'm like, say like you mean it. Next thing you know, guys, they were both in the floor, rolling, hugging each other, tickling each other, and laughing, because that's how we did it.
Yeah, it really wasn't that big of a deal. Like,
yeah. And you learned that. So, all right, guys. Hannah, it's time to go again.
Oh my gosh, what in the world?
I know. All right, guys. Well, we're going to end this podcast like we did the previous 4. All right. So until next time, bye.